Hey everyone, this is Holly, and in this video I'm going to show you how I created this book. It's the first book in the Foundation series by Isaac Asimov. This was a rebinding of a Folio Society edition that was printed in 2012. The first step with any rebinding is breaking down the book to signatures, which are folded groups of pages. It's not always the case that a book comes published in signatures. Folio Society books do, and that's one reason why I work with their books. They're also beautifully illustrated and have nice paper. I apply wheat paste to the spine to moisten up any paper linings that are there and to make them easier to rip off. The paste needs time to be absorbed, so I let it sit under plastic wrap for a while. What you find on the spine will vary by publisher. On this book, under this first paper layer is a cloth that I had to rip up, and under that was a layer of glue. Sometimes the glue you find on books can be removed by the rehydration method, but sometimes you have to use heat to melt the glue. Now the book is in a state where I can start building it how I would any other book. First up is punching holes for sewing the signatures together. I have to open each group of pages to find the middle, and that's where I punch the holes. The rectangle of paper I'm placing inside the pages is called a punching jig, and it ensures that I punch the holes at the same place in every signature. Sometimes we just forget to hit record. Backing is often paired with rounding, and rounding is literally just getting a curve on the spine. It helps the book maintain its shape over time. You might have a book on your shelf where the spine is collapsing inward. Rounding and backing help prevent that. What you're seeing here is the book placed in a press and the spine is pointing upwards. You can see that it has a curve because I've already rounded it. What I'm doing now is creating shoulders for the cover boards to nestle up against. Once the spine is in the shape I want it, I line it with a thin paper to help it stay in that shape. The binding structure I'm using for this book is called full leather with laced-on boards. Here I'm punching holes in the cover so I can use the cord that the text block was sewn onto to attach the covers. When the book is finished, the goal is to not see these holes or the cord that comes over onto the cover. I make the holes only just big enough and cut out channels to let the cord sink into and become flush with the coverboard. At this point, the boards are cut to the height I want, but they're left too wide because I don't yet know how exactly everything is going to line up in that direction. Once the boards are firmly attached, the foredge will get trimmed down. Lining the boards with paper helps smooth out the places where the cords are and any other little bumps. It also helps stabilize the board and reduces the amount of warping that can occur later in the process when we start doing things that introduce a lot of moisture. Now we're getting into the leather work. The type of leather most commonly used in bookbinding is goatskin that has been vegetable tanned. This type of leather usually comes in a thickness of around 1 millimeter or 2 to 3 ounce. 1 millimeter is great for the majority of the surface of the book, like over the covers, but it needs to be thinned out in certain places. The first is the turn-ins. That's where the leather wraps around the covers to the inside of the book. It also needs to be slightly pared down where it wraps around the spine to allow for easier opening. I use a Swiss-style paring knife, and what I'm doing here is called edge paring. I'm taking that 1 millimeter thickness down to nothing in a small strip along each edge of the leather. Next is thinning out a 20 millimeter wide border around the whole piece of leather down to about 0.5 millimeter in thickness. This is the section of the leather that will wrap around the boards. Thinner leather is easier to manipulate and it hugs the curves of the board better. If you look at the leather closely, you can see that there's a line where the color is a bit darker. If you were to run your finger over the grain side of the leather, you could feel a ridge there where there's an abrupt change in the leather's thickness. That needs to be smoothed out. It can be done with a Charfix, which is the device I was using in the last step, but I prefer to use a knife for better control. The thickness needs to go from that original 1 millimeter down to 0 at the edges without any noticeable lumps or dips. Leather is a lovely material to work with, but it shows all your sins, so this step is all about making sure it is perfect. There's a lot that can be said about covering. This stage usually takes about an hour, but can take longer if things are being fiddly. The raw footage of this was about 40 minutes, so I opted to time-lapse this part so you can see most of it. I place the book right in the center, and when I bring the leather up onto the cover boards, I have to make sure all that paring I did lines up right where I need it to. It's easy to make scratches or divots in the leather while you're working, so the book needs to be handled very gently while covering. I made leather hinges for this book, which consists of a 0.4 millimeter thick strip of leather being pasted in to cover the interior hinge of the book. Once the hinges are fully dry, I start working on leveling out the leather on the inside of each cover, It's all about getting a seamless transition between the leather and whatever material you're going to put on top of it as the paste down. In the case of this book, it'll be paper. To further level out the inside of the cover, a piece of paper is glued in. This fills in the space between the turn-ins to raise it up and get it more flush with the leather. The paper and leather do overlap slightly, but the edges of the paper have been sanded down. This paper also acts as a pull to counteract the outward warping of the covers that the leather created. With almost every book I make, I create practice plaquettes to test out whatever design technique I'm planning to use. My design for the cover of this book involves a lot of gold tooling, so here I'm testing out how the gold will look on this color of leather and how to build the overall shape that I want. These tools are brass and heated, which activates the adhesive that's on the back of the gold foil. Line pallets are one way to tool a straight line on a book. I have the layout on the tracing film, and I'm choosing pallets to match the line length. The main part of the design represents the principle of mass action. In sociology, mass action is when many people are performing a similar behavior simultaneously but without coordination. In the book, one of the main characters predicts the future with math based on this principle. Reading about mass action made me envision a murmuration of starlings, which I chose to represent with dots in a swirling pattern. Thanks for watching. I hope you found this peek into the process of bookbinding interesting. If you want to see more images of the completed book, you can check out my website, blackoakbindery.com, which I'll have linked in the description. Also, let me know what you'd like to see a custom binding of.